Good evening and welcome back to Haunted Tales. Tonight, we journey into the ancient shadows of the Appalachian Mountains, a place where the forests are older than memory itself, and the silence hides things far more unsettling than wild animals. These are not campfire legends. What you're about to hear are 10 of the most disturbing true accounts from rangers, hunters, loggers, and locals who have faced the darkness of these deep woods and never walked away the same. Every story has been traced back to witness reports, police files, and community records, lending weight to experiences that defy explanation. In this landscape of endless ridges and valleys, isolation is more than just a feeling. It's a predator of its own. So if you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Haunted Tales and turn on the bell, because every night we bring you stories that will follow you long after the screen goes dark. Now, take a deep breath, stay close to the light, and follow me into the Appalachians, where secrets older than time wait for those who dare to listen. Coal River Road stretches like a dark vein through southern West Virginia, winding between dense forests, abandoned mining towns, and the sluggish river that gives it its name. By day, it looks innocuous: cracked asphalt, a faded yellow line, and occasional houses clinging to hillsides. By night, however, it transforms. The headlights of a lone vehicle illuminate only a tiny circle of the road ahead. Beyond that, the shadows swallow everything: the trees, the river, the air itself. Drivers who know this road whisper that it carries more than cars. It carries secrets, tragedies, and souls that never left. Coal River Road has always been tied to hardship. In the early 20th century, the region thrived on coal, but it came at a cost. Mining companies erected sprawling camps along the river, packing families into shacks with no plumbing, no heat, and little safety. Men descended into the dark shafts for 12-hour shifts, returning coated in soot, coughing relentlessly. Explosions, collapses, and black lung were constant threats. In 1943, a catastrophic cave-in trapped 39 miners beneath a ridge near the road. Rescue teams could not reach them. Their bodies were never recovered. Families were left to grieve in silence, graves empty, lives shattered. Shortly after that disaster, strange occurrences began along the road. Drivers and locals reported lantern-like lights moving in the woods at night, like miners still searching for an escape. Children playing near the river claimed they heard coughing and whispers even when no one was around. But the most persistent reports involved a woman who appeared on the road itself, pale, soaked, her dark hair plastered to her face, and her eyes wide with something undefinable. The first official account comes from 1950. A farmer delivering milk home late at night told the sheriff he'd seen a woman staggering along the roadside. When he slowed, she raised a hand trembling, her eyes hollow. Her skin was ice, he said later. It was dripping water all over my arm. And then she just vanished, like mist. He was so shaken, he ran his truck into a ditch less than a mile later. By 1965, 2 teenagers leaving a high school dance encountered her. They described her barefoot, wearing a tattered dress, hair wet, standing at the edge of the road. The driver swerved to avoid her. When they looked back, the asphalt was empty. Not a sound, only the river murmuring below. We didn't imagine it, the girl said years later. She was real. She was right there. Truckers soon added their voices to the legend. One of the most chilling testimonies came from a man known as Red in 1998. Driving a loaded rig down Coal River Road at 1 a.m., he saw her step directly into his lane. Slamming the brakes, his truck jackknifed, scraping along the roadside. When he climbed out, shaken and bleeding, there was nothing there. No footprints, no figure retreating into the woods. Just silence and the black river reflecting the moon. Red later told the state trooper, if she had been real, she would have been under my wheels. But she wasn't. She was something else. Locals argue endlessly about her origin. Some say she is a miner's widow, endlessly searching for her husband who never returned. Others link her to the 1955 flood, when the Coal River swelled and ripped houses from their foundations. Among the victims was a young mother and her 2 children. Their bodies were recovered downstream, all except hers. Still others claim she predates the 20th century, a soul lost from pioneer days, wandering the mountains after being buried without a name. Those who have encountered her describe more than just sight. Temperature drops suddenly, frost forming on the windshield even in summer. Radios cut out, engines sputter, dogs in passing vehicles whine or refuse to move. And then there is the smell, sharp, metallic, the tang of rust or iron, like blood long forgotten. One of the most detailed accounts came in 2014, when a paranormal investigation team camped along the shoulder. Cameras, motion sensors, and audio recorders were set up. Hours passed with nothing. Then at 2:13 a.m., a faint whisper was caught on tape. "Help me." Later, reviewing thermal footage, they saw a human-shaped blur on the shoulder, standing silently, dissolving within seconds. The team was shaken but could not explain the phenomenon. Another chilling encounter came from a Charleston couple in 2019. Driving home after a wedding, they saw her near an old bridge, shivering and soaked, holding out her hands. Against their better judgment, they slowed. The bride rolled down her window. "Do you need help?" The woman leaned closer, her hollow eyes locking onto hers. And then she evaporated, leaving only mist in the headlights. The couple sped away, hearts pounding, but for weeks the bride felt watched. Mirrors fogged inexplicably. Their dog barked at empty corners. One night, brushing her teeth, she saw the pale woman standing behind her in the bathroom mirror, silent, dripping, waiting. Coal River Road continues to claim its toll. Vehicles skid into the river, trucks tip over on sharp curves, and nearly every survivor recalls swerving to avoid something that was never physically there. Locals advise newcomers the same caution. Don't stop, don't roll down your window, and don't look too long into the shadows. Those who ignore it carry her memory, sometimes for a lifetime, and some say she follows. Truckers have reported feeling a presence in their cab long after leaving the road. Hikers hear soft footsteps behind them in the forest, even long after the encounter. Her smell, her icy presence, lingers in homes, cars, and the mind. Coal River Road, hemmed in by the river and forest, remains quiet at night, seemingly ordinary, until you drive it alone. The mist hangs low over the water. The trees press close. The air smells of iron and wet earth. And somewhere on the shoulder, she waits, pale, wet, and watching. So if you ever find yourself traveling Coal River Road after dark, remember the warnings. Keep your eyes straight ahead, steady your hands on the wheel, and if a woman appears on the roadside, soaking wet, hair plastered to her face, eyes hollow and empty, whatever you do, just keep driving, because those who stop never forget her, and some never escape her shadow at all. Nestled deep within the rugged hills of eastern Kentucky, Devil's Fork Road winds through dense forests, abandoned homesteads, and the narrow hollows where sunlight rarely reaches the ground. By day, it is a quiet, lonely road, the kind where a driver can go miles without passing another vehicle. But at night, the silence becomes oppressive, almost alive, and travelers report a presence that seems to watch from the tree line, waiting. The road has a grim history. In the late 1800s, the area was the site of violent feuds between rival families competing for timber and coal rights. Blood was spilled freely, and many bodies were never recovered, buried hastily in shallow graves among the hills. Even after the feuds ended, accidents became frequent. Sharp hairpin turns claimed cars and horse-drawn wagons alike, especially during sudden rainstorms when the clay soil became slick and treacherous. Some locals whisper that the land itself is cursed, that it remembers every violent act committed there and manifests that memory in the form of restless spirits. The earliest known report of a spectral figure on Devil's Fork Road came in 1923. A traveling preacher, riding a mule-drawn wagon to a nearby church, recounted seeing a woman standing in the middle of the road just past the old fork. Her skin was pale in the moonlight, her eyes hollow and endless. When he tried to pass, she raised a hand, silently pleading, but the moment his wagon drew near, she vanished, leaving nothing but the echo of her desperate plea. The preacher swore he could still hear her voice over the hills long after he reached the church. Reports multiplied over the decades. Truckers, hikers, and locals tell of seeing a pale woman standing on the road's edge, sometimes holding a lantern that flickers like a dying candle. Some describe her reaching for passing vehicles, lips moving as if begging for help. Others see her in the middle of the road, motionless, head tilted unnaturally to one side. The most disturbing accounts come from those who tried to stop or approach her. She disappears instantly, leaving no footprints, no evidence of her presence. One of the most cited stories is that of James Big Jim Carpenter, a trucker who drove coal and timber along Devil's Fork Road for more than 20 years. In 1987, around midnight, he saw her standing beneath an ancient oak near the old Turner homestead. He swerved to avoid hitting her and narrowly missed plunging into a creek that runs alongside the road. When he stopped to catch his breath, she was gone. He told the sheriff later, "I've seen a lot in these hills, but nothing shook me like that. She wasn't human, not in the way we know. I know she was real, but I don't think she belonged in our world." Locals debate her identity. Some say she is the spirit of a young woman murdered during the feuds, dumped in the hollow and left to rot. Others claim she is the mother of a child lost to the river, searching endlessly for her baby. A few older residents whisper she may be far older, a pioneer woman wronged by her neighbors, now wandering the hills in perpetual grief. Regardless of her origin, the effect is the same: terror for those who see her. Witnesses consistently describe the chilling sensory experiences that accompany the sightings. Temperatures drop suddenly, breath freezing in midair. Fog can roll in even on clear nights, thick enough to obscure the road entirely. Engines stall without explanation. Radios cut out mid-broadcast. Dogs whine and refuse to move. And there is always the smell: damp soil, decayed leaves, and a sharp metallic tang, reminiscent of rust or old blood. In one particularly harrowing encounter in 2005, a young couple driving home from a concert spotted the figure on a narrow bridge spanning Devil's Fork Creek. She was soaking wet, her tattered dress clinging to her body. Against instinct, they slowed. She raised her hands, eyes wide and pleading. The girlfriend rolled down her window. "Do you need help?" The woman leaned close, dripping onto the car door, and in a heartbeat, she dissolved into mist. The couple sped away, but for weeks. They claimed the haunting followed them. Mirrors fogged without reason, shadows moved in empty rooms, and at night they could hear footsteps pacing in the hallway. Paranormal investigations have tried to capture evidence on Devil's Fork Road. In 2012, a small team set up cameras, thermal sensors, and audio recorders near the old Turner homestead. For hours, nothing occurred. Then, at 1:47 a.m., a recorder picked up faint sobbing, followed by a whisper, "Please, help me." Thermal footage revealed a figure standing briefly on the roadside, tall, indistinct, wet, before vanishing completely. Equipment showed no airflow, no shadows, and yet something had occupied that space. Some truckers report more aggressive encounters. In 2016, a driver hauling timber recounted swerving to avoid the figure, only to see her suddenly appear in his passenger side mirror, sitting silently beside him for several seconds. He nearly lost control of the rig. When he parked and ran back to check, the seat was empty. Yet weeks later, He still described waking to her shadow in the bedroom corner and hearing dripping water from no source. The road itself seems alive in these stories. Narrow curves, steep embankments, and trees that press close to the asphalt create a claustrophobic sensation. The river whispers beneath the embankments. Fog clings to the ground, obscuring vision. Even the most confident drivers report a feeling of being watched, a weight pressing from the trees, a subtle vibration in the road that doesn't belong to the vehicle. And then she appears. Devil's Fork Road continues to claim its toll. Cars skid off sharp turns, trucks tip on narrow stretches, and nearly every survivor of such accidents swears the same thing. They swerved to avoid someone that was never there. Authorities list the area as dangerous, but rarely acknowledge any paranormal activity. Locals, however, know better. They advise travelers after dark, don't stop, don't roll down your window, and don't meet her gaze. To those who ignore the warning, the haunting can follow long after the road is behind them. Reflections in mirrors, shadows at the edge of vision, dripping water in rooms without leaks. These are all reported by people who have glimpsed her in the night. The legend grows with every encounter. So if you ever find yourself traveling Devil's Fork Road after dark, with the fog thick and the river murmuring alongside, keep your eyes fixed ahead. Do not glance into the shadows. Keep your hand steady on the wheel. And if you see her, pale, wet, tattered, pleading silently at the roadside, whatever you do, just keep driving, because those who stop never forget her. And some say she doesn't let go, following travelers home, a shadow in mirrors, a presence that waits, silent, patient, and endless. Paint Rock Road winds through the rugged hills of eastern Tennessee, threading its way between dense forests, abandoned cabins, and narrow hollows that few dare to traverse after dark. By day, it seems unremarkable, a two-lane ribbon of asphalt cutting through rolling hills. By night, however, it transforms into something sinister, a corridor where the fog creeps low to the ground. The wind whispers through skeletal trees, and shadows move in ways that defy logic. The road's history is steeped in legend. Long before settlers arrived, the Cherokee called this area home. They spoke of spirits who guarded the mountains, punishing those who disrespected the land or ventured carelessly into sacred areas. With European settlement, families cleared the hills for farms, logging, and hunting, but the land retained its reputation. Numerous deaths occurred along Paint Rock Road, drownings in the river, accidents on its sharp curves, and disappearances in the woods that were never explained. Some locals say that the road itself remembers these tragedies, that the energy of loss lingers in the misty hollows. One of the earliest recorded sightings occurred in 1932. A traveling preacher recounted driving home late at night when he noticed a young woman standing by a river crossing, her dress soaked, her hair plastered to her face. As he slowed to offer help, she raised a hand, silent and pleading. When he looked again, she had vanished. No footprints, no trace, just the mist rising from the water and the echo of a river flowing. The story spread quietly among locals who whispered that her spirit wandered the road, searching for something lost. Reports multiplied over the decades. Truckers, hikers, and night travelers frequently described encounters with a spectral woman, sometimes a child, sometimes an older man, standing on the roadside, often wet, often pleading, sometimes motionless. Drivers speak of the moment when headlights illuminate her face, pale, hollow-eyed, with an expression of deep sorrow. Some report seeing her step onto the road only to vanish the instant they brake or look away. Others describe figures emerging from the river itself, dripping water, then fading into the fog. In 1978, a trucker named Sam Whitaker described his encounter in detail. He was hauling timber late one winter night when he saw a woman standing at the edge of a sharp curve near Paint Rock Creek. She appeared drenched, shivering, her eyes fixed on him. Sam swerved instinctively, nearly driving into the creek. When he stopped and looked back, she was gone, leaving only the damp fog curling along the water. Sam later told the sheriff, "I know what I saw. She wasn't a person, not really, but she was there. I can still feel her staring." Another account came in 1992 from a young couple traveling home from Nashville. They spotted a boy standing barefoot at a small bridge crossing the creek. He waved frantically as if trying to stop them. Against their better judgment, they slowed. Just as the passenger reached to open the window, the boy disappeared, leaving only a sudden chill in the air and the echo of water splashing below. Weeks later, the couple reported strange phenomena at home. Mirrors fogged inexplicably. Shadows moved in empty rooms, and the faint sound of running water lingered in the hallway. Paint Rock Road has also claimed lives in conventional ways. Sharp turns, steep embankments, and sudden fog have caused numerous accidents, some fatal. Many survivors of these crashes swear they saw figures on the road before their vehicles veered off course, figures that disappeared moments later. Law enforcement chalks these up to weather, fatigue, or imagination, but locals insist the experiences are real. In 2003, a trucker named Robert Bobby Lane was hauling produce when he saw a woman standing near an abandoned cabin beside the road. She appeared wet, her dress clinging to her body, hair plastered to her face. As he slowed, the cab grew icy cold, frost forming on the windshield even in summer. When he checked later, the brakes had inexplicably locked for several seconds. Bobby swore he felt a hand brush the back of his neck, though no one was in the cab. Witnesses describe a variety of sensory anomalies accompanying the sightings. Sudden drops in temperature, frost forming on windows, engine failures, radios cutting out, and dogs whimpering or refusing to move are all reported. Even the forest seems alive. The trees creak as if in conversation, leaves rustle without wind, and distant whispers float through the hollows. And there is often a smell, damp soil, rotting vegetation, and metallic iron, like blood long forgotten. In 2010, a paranormal research team set up cameras and audio equipment along Paint Rock Road. Hours passed uneventfully until 2:07 a.m., when a recorder captured faint sobbing and whispered words, "Please, help me." Reviewing thermal footage revealed a figure standing on the roadside, tall, indistinct, wet, before fading into nothing. Investigators left shaken, unable to explain the phenomenon through natural causes. A family driving home from a reunion in 2015 reported one of the most harrowing encounters. They saw a figure near the creek crossing, pale, wet, and pleading. Against instinct, they slowed, and the mother rolled down the window. The figure leaned in, and in a heartbeat, evaporated into mist. Weeks later, the family experienced disturbances at home. Doors opened and closed. Shadows shifted, and the sound of running water echoed through empty rooms. The road itself seems to conspire with the spirits. Narrow curves, overhanging trees, and fog-filled hollows create claustrophobic conditions. The river whispers below, and travelers often report a weight pressing on the chest as if the land itself were observing. Figures appear suddenly, vanish instantly, and leave an impression that lingers far longer than the drive itself. Locals caution, keep your speed steady, focus on the road, and never stop for figures on the roadside. Those who ignore the advice often experience disturbances that follow them home. Shadows in mirrors, footsteps in empty rooms, and an unshakable feeling of being watched. Despite modern road improvements, sightings continue. Every year, new reports emerge describing pale, hollow-eyed figures emerging from fog or creek water, moving unnaturally and disappearing without a trace. Truckers, tourists, and locals alike share remarkably similar accounts, reinforcing the legend of Paint Rock Road as a place where the dead linger and the living are warned. Paint Rock Road is more than asphalt and signage. It is a liminal space where the living intersect with the memories of those lost to the river, the woods. Highway 209 snakes through the Pisgah National Forest, threading between towering spruce and rhododendron thickets, narrow river gorges, and the crumbling remnants of old Appalachian homesteads. By day, it is a scenic route, famous for its autumn foliage and winding curves. By night, however, the road becomes something else entirely. A corridor of shadows, whispers, and encounters that leave even the most experienced drivers trembling. Locals refer to it as the Rattler, not only for its serpentine curves, but for the strange rattling sounds some claim to hear echoing from the trees at night. The road's history is steeped in tragedy. In the early 1900s, settlers and loggers battled not only the wilderness, but one another for timber rights. Accidents were common. Wagons tipped over cliffs, children fell into river gorges, and entire families vanished without explanation. Later, during the Great Depression, Highway 209 became a lifeline for moonshiners and itinerant workers. Shootouts and murders left bodies in the woods, often unclaimed and unrecorded. Over the decades, the stories of death, loss, and unexplained disappearances became woven into the very soil of the area. Witnesses say the first signs of the supernatural occur subtly. A shadow flitting between trees, a cold mist that seems to follow the car, or the sudden scent of smoke and decay. Then comes the figure, a pale woman, or sometimes a man, standing at the edge of the asphalt, often appearing wet as if rising from the river below. Drivers report a slow, unnatural motion as they approach, as if the figure is both tethered to the earth and entirely untouchable by it. In 1968, a trucker named Harold Fields recounted his first encounter. He was hauling timber late one October night when he saw a woman standing in the middle of a sharp curve near a creek crossing. She wore a long gray dress and her hair clung to her face. He swerved to avoid her, nearly tipping his rig into the gorge. When he looked back, there was nothing but the fog rising from the creek. "I could feel her eyes on me," he said years later. Even when she wasn't there, another account came from a young couple in 1983. They had driven from Asheville to visit relatives and were making the final descent through the forest when they saw a boy, no older than 10, standing barefoot at the roadside. He waved frantically, as if signaling them to stop. Against their instincts, they slowed, but before the passenger could roll down the window, he simply vanished. No footsteps, no sound, just empty road and a lingering chill. The couple swore they heard a faint voice in the wind later that night, crying for help. Highway 209 has also claimed lives in more conventional ways, reinforcing its sinister reputation. Sharp turns, slick mountain roads, and sudden fog have caused countless accidents, many of which involve fatalities. Survivors of these crashes often report seeing figures before their vehicles went off the road, figures that disappeared moments later. Authorities attribute it to fog, fatigue, or imagination, but local stories persist, growing with every witness. One of the most compelling cases occurred in 2007. A trucker known as Big Joe was hauling produce along Highway 209 when he saw a woman near an abandoned cabin, her face pale and eyes hollow. He slowed, feeling a chill crawl down his spine. The next thing he remembered, he was parked several miles ahead, sweating, his rig trembling as if it had hit ice. Upon checking the logs, he discovered the brakes had locked momentarily for no mechanical reason. He swore afterward that she had reached into the cab, though there was no trace of her presence. Witnesses report similar sensory anomalies during encounters: sudden drops in temperature, frost forming inside the windshield on summer nights, engine stalling, and electronics flickering or cutting out entirely. Some say the forest itself seems to react. A stillness, then a subtle movement out of the corner of the eye, as if the trees themselves are watching. And there is often a smell: damp earth, rotting leaves, and something metallic like blood, lingering just long enough to unsettle the senses. Paranormal researchers have spent nights along Highway 209, setting up cameras and audio equipment. One group recorded a soft sobbing around 1:45 a.m., followed by whispers that sounded like, "Don't leave me." Their infrared cameras captured a figure standing briefly on the roadside, only to vanish into thin air moments later. Investigators left shaken, unable to explain the phenomenon through natural causes. In 2014, a family reported a terrifying encounter. Driving home late after visiting relatives, they saw a man standing barefoot on a narrow bridge spanning a creek. He raised his hand, beckoning. The mother instinctively rolled down the window. As she did, the figure vanished, leaving only a wet, cold mist and the sound of rushing water. The family sped away, but weeks later, they reported hearing footsteps, pacing their empty house and seeing fleeting shadows in mirrors. Highway 209 has earned a reputation, not only for its physical danger, but for the intangible dread that follows those who travel it after dark. The locals advise, keep your speed steady, focus on the road, and whatever you do, do not stop or attempt to make contact with the figures. Those who ignore this advice sometimes report disturbances in their homes for weeks afterward. Strange noises, moving shadows, and the unmistakable feeling of being watched. Despite modern lighting, road maintenance, and surveillance cameras, the sightings continue. New reports come in each year, describing pale figures, fleeting glimpses, and unexplained touches. Truckers, tourists, and locals all share remarkably similar accounts. The apparition appears suddenly, moves unnaturally, and disappears without a trace. Many describe her or him as wet, as if emerging from the creek, eyes hollow, a silent plea in their gaze. Highway 209 is more than a road. It is a threshold between the living and the memories of those lost to the forest, accidents and feuds. The shadows press close, the fog creeps in, and the river whispers beneath the asphalt. Travelers are reminded that not all dangers are mechanical or natural. Some are far older, lingering in the curves and hollows, waiting for the next set of headlights. If you ever find yourself on Highway 209 after nightfall, with the fog rolling in and the river murmuring beside you, keep your eyes straight ahead. Focus on the yellow line and the road's serpentine curves. If a figure appears, pale, wet, and hollow-eyed, standing in the mist, whatever you do, just keep driving, because those who stop or attempt to help often carry her memory forever. And some say she follows, a shadow in mirrors, footsteps in empty rooms, and a presence that waits silently for those who once glimpsed her in the night. Sandstone Falls Road twists along the rugged Appalachian terrain, hugging cliffs and winding around ancient forests where sunlight rarely reaches the forest floor. By day, the road offers breathtaking views of waterfalls and dense hardwood forests. By night, however, it becomes a corridor of dread. Locals call it the Screaming Road, not for any sound it makes naturally, but for the whispered voices, sudden chills, and vanishing figures reported by travelers after dark. The road's grim reputation is rooted in history. In the late 1800s, logging and coal mining operations dominated the area. Entire communities sprang up along the road, only to vanish after mine closures and economic collapse. Accidents were common. Wagons toppled off cliffs, miners died in collapses, and entire families drowned in flash floods sweeping through the narrow hollows. Many bodies were never recovered, leaving the locals to speculate about restless spirits wandering the hills. The first documented spectral sighting occurred in 1925. A farmer named Eli Thompson was returning from town after selling produce when he spotted a woman standing at the edge of a bridge near Sandstone Falls. Her dress clung to her drenched body, and her long hair obscured her face. She raised a trembling hand as if pleading for help. When Thompson slowed to offer aid, she vanished into the fog. Years later, he recounted, "I knew she wasn't real, and yet she was there, watching, waiting. I could feel it in my bones." Over the decades, the sightings multiplied. Truckers, tourists, and locals described figures appearing suddenly, usually pale, wet, and hollow-eyed. Sometimes a child stands barefoot on the roadside. Other times, a woman or man emerges from the forest, motionless, seemingly tethered to the road yet not bound by earthly physics. The phenomenon is consistent. Headlights illuminate the figure, drivers swerve, and in a blink, the apparition disappears without leaving a trace. One particularly chilling encounter occurred in 1968. A coal trucker, Harold Fields, recounted that as he descended a sharp curve near the Sandstone Creek Bridge, he saw a young girl waving frantically in the middle of the road. He slowed, unsure whether to stop, but the moment he glanced away briefly, she vanished, leaving the road empty and the mist curling around the trees. He later described feeling watched for weeks after, as if a presence lingered in his home. In 1985, two hikers returning from a camping trip spotted a woman standing on a narrow path intersecting the road. Her clothing was tattered, dripping with water, and her gaze locked onto theirs with an intensity that left them paralyzed. They attempted to approach, but she vanished into the mist before they could reach her. The hikers swore that the forest seemed alive afterward, branches swaying without wind, faint whispers in empty hollows, and the smell of iron and damp earth hanging in the air. Accidents along Sandstone Falls Road reinforce its sinister reputation. Sharp turns, slick slopes, and fog contribute to frequent wrecks, many of which occur near the bridges or waterfalls. Survivors of these crashes often report seeing figures before veering off the road, the same pale, wet, pleading apparitions described by previous witnesses. Authorities usually attribute it to fog, fatigue, or misjudgment, but locals insist there is something far more unnatural at work. In 1999, a trucker named Samuel Sam Whitaker described an encounter that made headlines. Hauling timber late at night, he saw a figure standing at the roadside near the old mill ruins. She appeared soaked, shivering, her hair plastered to her face. As he slowed, the cab temperature plummeted, frost forming inside the windshield even in the dead of summer. When he checked later, the brakes had inexplicably locked for several seconds. Sam swore he felt a hand graze his shoulder, though no one was in the cab. Witnesses consistently report strange sensory anomalies during sightings, sudden drops in temperature, frost on windows, engines stalling, radios cutting out, and dogs whimpering or refusing to move. The forest itself seems to react. Trees creak as if communicating, leaves rustle without wind, and faint voices echo through the hollows. A metallic, iron-like smell often accompanies these encounters, adding to the unease. Paranormal research teams have investigated Sandstone Falls Road multiple times. In 2012, a team set up infrared cameras, thermal sensors, and audio recorders near the creek. For hours, nothing occurred. At 1:56 a.m., audio picked up faint sobbing followed by whispers, "Help me!" Thermal footage revealed a human-shaped blur standing on the roadside for a few seconds before vanishing completely. Investigators were left shaken, unable to explain the phenomenon through natural means. In 2015, a family traveling home from a reunion spotted a woman standing near the creek crossing. Pale, drenched, and hollow-eyed, she appeared to plead silently. Against instinct, the mother rolled down the window, and the figure evaporated into mist in an instant. Weeks afterward, the family experienced strange occurrences at home, doors creaking open, shadows moving, and the sound of running water echoing through empty rooms. Sandstone Falls Road is more than asphalt. It is a liminal space, a threshold where the living encounter the memories of those lost to the forest, accidents, and tragic events. The shadows press close, the fog creeps in, and the river murmurs below, reminding travelers that not all dangers are natural. Some are rooted in grief, violence, and loss, lingering in the curves and hollows, waiting for the next set of headlights. Locals advise, keep your hands on the wheel, eyes on the road, and whatever you do, do not stop or attempt to help the figures. Those who ignore the advice often experience lingering disturbances, shadows in mirrors, footsteps in empty rooms, and a sensation of being watched. Despite modern road improvements, the sightings persist. New reports emerge each year, describing pale, hollow-eyed figures moving unnaturally, emerging from fog or creek water, and disappearing without leaving a trace. Truckers, tourists, and locals alike share remarkably similar accounts, reinforcing the legend of Sandstone Falls Road as a place where the dead linger and the living are warned. If you ever find yourself traveling Sandstone Falls Road after dark, with the fog rolling in and the creek whispering beside you, keep your eyes fixed ahead. Focus on the asphalt and curves. If a figure appears, pale, wet, hollow-eyed, and silently pleading, whatever you do, just keep driving, because those who stop often carry the memory forever. And some say the figure follows. A shadow in mirrors, footsteps in empty rooms, and a presence that waits silently for those who once glimpsed her in the night. Hickory Hollow Road winds through the steep forested valleys of southwestern Virginia, a narrow stretch of asphalt flanked by dense hardwoods and steep embankments. By day, the road is deceptively tranquil, the kind of place where sunlight filters softly through the canopy and the air smells of pine and damp earth. By night, however, Hickory Hollow transforms into a corridor of dread. Locals speak of the road in hushed tones, warning travelers that its shadows are alive and its curves conceal more than sharp turns. The history of Hickory Hollow Road is intertwined with hardship, tragedy, and whispered folklore. In the late 1800s, the area was home to small farms and logging operations. Families lived in isolated homesteads, often a mile or more from the nearest neighbor. Accidents were frequent. Children fell from cliffs, wagons toppled into the hollow, and miners and loggers died in mishaps that were never fully recorded. During harsh winters, residents would vanish in blizzards, and many bodies were never recovered. Over time, the locals began to speak of spirits lingering in the hollows, particularly along the road that cuts through the forested valleys. The earliest recorded encounter occurred in 1928. A traveling preacher driving his wagon late one night reported seeing a woman standing at the edge of a creek bridge along Hickory Hollow. Her dress was soaked, hair plastered to her face, and eyes hollow with despair. As he approached, she raised a trembling hand in silent plea. When he looked again, she had vanished into the fog rising from the creek. He recounted later, "I could feel her presence for miles after. It wasn't something human, but it was there, watching." Over the decades, the road became infamous for its spectral visitors. Drivers describe sudden appearances of pale, wet figures, often hollow-eyed, sometimes a child, sometimes an adult, standing at the roadside or in the middle of the road. The figures do not behave like the living. They are motionless, silent, and untouchable, yet they evoke a deep, primal fear. Headlights illuminate them, drivers swerve in terror, and then the figures vanish without a trace, leaving only the echo of wind, trees, and rushing water. One of the most well-known encounters occurred in 1969. A trucker named William "Bill" Andrews was transporting coal when he spotted a woman standing near an old, abandoned cabin along the road. Her dress clung to her body, dripping water, and her gaze locked onto his eyes. As he slowed, a cold mist filled the cab, frost forming on the windshield even in the midst of summer. When he checked the brakes later, they had locked inexplicably for several seconds. Bill swore he felt a hand brush his shoulder, though no one was present. In 1984, a couple driving home from a festival reported seeing a boy, barefoot and drenched, standing on a curve above Hickory Hollow Creek. He waved frantically, as if begging them to stop. Against their instincts, they slowed, but as soon as the passenger reached to roll down the window, the boy vanished into thin air. Weeks later, the couple reported strange occurrences in their home. Mirrors fogged unexpectedly, shadows shifted, and the faint sound of running water echoed through empty rooms. Accidents along Hickory Hollow Road are common and often fatal. Sharp curves, slick roads, and sudden fog contribute to crashes, many of which occur near bridges or hollow crossings. Survivors frequently describe seeing figures on the road before losing control, pale, hollow-eyed, pleading apparitions that vanish moments later. Authorities attribute these to weather, fatigue, or imagination. But local lore tells a different story. The road remembers those who died there, and the spirits linger. In 1998, a trucker named Samuel "Sam" Whitaker shared his chilling experience. Hauling timber late one night, he saw a woman standing at the roadside, drenched, her hair plastered to her face. As he slowed, the temperature inside the cab dropped sharply, frost forming inside the windshield. When he later checked, the brakes had locked without explanation, and he swore he felt a hand touch his shoulder. Though no one was in the vehicle, witnesses consistently report sensory anomalies during sightings: sudden cold, frost forming on windows, engines stalling, radios cutting out, and dogs whimpering or refusing to move. The forest itself seems alive. Trees sway without wind, leaves rustle, and whispers echo through the hollows. A metallic, iron-like scent often accompanies encounters, adding to the pervasive dread. Paranormal research teams have documented the road multiple times. In 2011, investigators set up infrared cameras, thermal sensors, and audio recorders along Hickory Hollow. Hours passed uneventfully until 2:03 a.m., when faint sobbing and whispers were recorded. Please, help me." Thermal footage revealed a human-shaped blur standing on the roadside for a few seconds before vanishing completely. Investigators were left shaken, unable to explain the phenomenon through conventional means. In 2016, a family traveling home after a reunion reported a terrifying encounter. They saw a figure standing near a small creek, pale, soaked, and hollow-eyed, silently pleading. Against instinct, the mother rolled down the window. The figure evaporated instantly into mist. Weeks later, the family experienced disturbances at home. Doors opened and closed without reason. Shadows moved, and the sound of running water echoed through empty rooms. Hickory Hollow Road is more than a road. It is a liminal space where the living encounter the memories of those lost to accidents, the forest, and tragic events. The shadows press close, the fog creeps in, and the creek murmurs below, reminding travelers that not all dangers are natural. Some are rooted in grief and violence, lingering in the curves and hollows, waiting for the next vehicle to illuminate them with headlights. Locals advise, keep your hands on the wheel, eyes on the road, and whatever you do, do not stop or attempt to help the figures. Those who ignore the advice often experience lingering disturbances, shadows in mirrors, footsteps in empty rooms, and the unnerving feeling of being watched. Despite modern road improvements, sightings continue. New reports surface each year describing pale, wet, hollow-eyed figures moving unnaturally, emerging from fog or creek water, and vanishing without a trace. Truckers, tourists, and locals alike share remarkably similar accounts, reinforcing the legend of Hickory Hollow Road as a place where the dead linger and the living are warned. If you ever travel Hickory Hollow Road after nightfall, with fog rolling in and the creek murmuring nearby, keep your eyes on the asphalt and curves ahead. If a figure appears, pale, wet, hollow-eyed, silently pleading, whatever you do, just keep driving, because those who stop often carry the memory forever. And some say she follows, a shadow in mirrors, footsteps in empty rooms, and a presence that waits silently for those who once glimpsed her in the night. Whispering Pines Road cuts through the heart of rural North Carolina, a winding two-lane strip of cracked asphalt bordered by towering pine trees. In the daytime, the forest hums with cicadas and the sweet smell of resin hangs in the air. But at night, the same trees seem to lean inward, blotting out the moonlight, their branches clawing over the road like skeletal fingers. The locals say the forest speaks after dark. They say the pines whisper. The history of the road is stained with both tragedy and superstition. In the early 1900s, a logging company carved the route through untouched wilderness. Camps dotted the roadside, where lumberjacks worked long, dangerous shifts felling ancient pines. Many men were killed in accidents, crushed under falling trees, caught in saws, or lost in sudden storms. Graves with no markers still lie hidden under the pine needles. When the timber dried up, the camps were abandoned, leaving nothing but rotting cabins and hollowed stumps. The name Whispering Pines came not from the industry, but from an older legend. Cherokee elders once warned settlers that the pines carried voices of ancestors, of the lost, of those who never escaped the forest's grasp. They claimed the trees themselves remembered blood spilled on the land, and when the wind caught the branches just right, the forest would whisper warnings or lures. The first modern account of strange happenings along the road came in 1934. A farmer named Jacob Riley was driving his wagon back from town when he heard voices drifting through the pines. He thought it was children laughing, but as he drew closer, the voices turned to anguished cries. Then he saw them, faint flickering shapes between the trees, faces pale and mouths open in soundless screams. His horses bolted, nearly overturning the wagon. Jacob never traveled that road again after sunset. Since then, the stories have multiplied. Travelers describe the same eerie pattern: voices in the trees, shadows darting just beyond headlights, sudden temperature drops, and the sensation of being followed. Sometimes it's a single figure on the roadside. Other times, it's an entire procession of pale shapes moving silently through the woods, always fleeting, always vanishing when approached. One of the most chilling accounts came from 1962. A trucker named Walter Hughes was hauling tobacco late at night when his headlights caught what looked like a man in tattered clothes standing at the bend of the road. Walter slowed, thinking it was a hitchhiker. But as the figure turned, its face was hollow, like bark stretched thin over bone. Walter swerved in panic, his truck skidding onto the shoulder. When he looked back, the figure was gone. He later swore the whispers followed him for weeks, in his cab, in his home, even in his sleep. In 1987, two teenagers driving home from a football game claimed to have seen a group of figures standing deep in the pines, their car windows fogged from the inside as faint whispers filled the cab, though the night was dry and clear. They tried to turn up the radio to drown it out, but the speakers crackled with static, carrying a single chilling phrase: "Come closer." Accidents are disturbingly common along Whispering Pines Road. Sharp curves, sudden fog, and disorienting darkness combine with something harder to explain. Survivors often tell of being distracted by figures in the woods or compelled by whispers urging them to look away from the road. Some say the trees themselves seem to bend closer, funneling drivers into danger. Authorities blame fatigue or overactive imaginations, but locals know better. In 2003, a family returning from a reunion had their own encounter. The father, James Carter, later told investigators that he heard his daughter laughing in the back seat, but she had been asleep. The laughter grew louder, echoing outside the car until pale faces emerged from the roadside trees. James floored the accelerator, but his wife swore she saw one of the figures run alongside the car, keeping pace with impossible speed before vanishing into the pines. Weeks later, the family reported disturbances at home, whispers in empty rooms, shadows moving across walls, and the sound of pine needles rustling indoors where none should exist. Paranormal investigators have tried to document the phenomenon. In 2014, a group set up equipment at a curve notorious for accidents. Audio devices captured faint murmurs that grew louder near midnight, forming fragments of words. "Stay here forever." Thermal cameras revealed multiple heat signatures among the trees, shaped like human figures, though no one was physically present. When the team tried to approach, their batteries drained instantly and the shapes disappeared. Another investigation in 2019 brought even more unsettling evidence. A team recorded high-frequency sounds resembling whispers layered over each other, as if dozens of voices spoke at once. The lead investigator described the sensation as standing in a crowd you couldn't see, surrounded by voices begging and warning at the same time. Locals have their own explanations. Some believe the whispers are the voices of loggers and settlers who died violently, their spirits bound to the land. Others claim the Cherokee legend was right. The pines themselves hold memory, speaking in the voices of the dead to lure the living deeper into the forest. A few whisper of something older, not ghosts, but a presence that feeds on grief and fear, wearing familiar voices to draw people off the road. Despite countless warnings, the sightings persist. New reports emerge each year of travelers hearing voices or seeing pale figures in the trees. Dogs refuse to walk that road at night, often whining and straining at leashes. Cars stall inexplicably, headlights flicker, and radios fill with static when the whispers begin. One chilling detail connects nearly all encounters: the presence lingers. Those who hear the whispers often report disturbances for weeks afterward. Doors open on their own. Pine needles appear inside homes. Most unsettling of all, faint voices echo at night, repeating their names, calling from just beyond the walls. To this day, Whispering Pines Road is avoided after dark by many locals. Some take long detours to steer clear of its haunted stretch. Truckers share warnings over CB radios. If you hear the forest talking, don't listen. Just drive. Parents warn teenagers not to linger there, and hikers avoid the woods, especially when the wind stirs the branches. If you ever find yourself on Whispering Pines Road after midnight, with the pines leaning close and the wind threading through their branches, listen carefully. The voices you hear may not be your imagination. They may be the echoes of those who never escaped the forest, or something far older, waiting in the shadows of the trees. And if the whispers call your name, do not answer, because those who do are never the same again. New River Gorge, West Virginia, is known today for its breathtaking cliffs, steel-arched bridge, and pristine wilderness. But long before thrill-seekers came to raft its rapids or climb its sheer rock walls, this valley was a place of hardship, death, and sorrow. Carved deep into the Appalachian Mountains, the gorge was once lined with mining towns, rail lines, and company camps where generations labored in darkness and danger. Hundreds perished in cave-ins, floods, fires, and accidents. Entire towns vanished when the coal companies left, leaving behind ghostly ruins hidden in the forest. Threading through all of it is New River Gorge Road, a twisting, narrow stretch of asphalt that hugs the cliffs and plunges through shadowed hollows. By day, the road offers jaw-dropping views of the river far below. But by night, drivers say it transforms into something much darker. Locals whisper that the road is haunted by the miners, loggers, and families who died in the gorge. Some call it cursed, a stretch where the living and the dead cross paths far too often. The legends begin as early as the 1870s, when rail workers building track along the river reported seeing strange figures at dusk. They described men carrying lanterns who walked ahead of trains, warning of danger, only to vanish when approached. Superstitious workers insisted these were the ghosts of those killed in blasting accidents, returning to prevent others from sharing their fate. Some crews refused to work certain shifts unless a priest blessed the ground first. As coal mining boomed, tragedies multiplied. Explosions were common, sometimes killing dozens at once. Survivors often swore they heard knocking deep in the mines afterward. Not the sounds of rock shifting, but deliberate, rhythmic pounding, as if the dead were trying to signal the living. When accidents spilled into the newspapers, locals noticed that strange apparitions often appeared on the roads near the mines in the following weeks. Soot-covered men limping along the roadside, coughing, waving for help. But when cars stopped, no one was there. One of the earliest recorded stories comes from 1906, when a coal foreman named Elijah Branham was riding home by buggy late at night. On a sharp bend overlooking the river, his horse suddenly froze, refusing to move. Branham peered into the darkness and saw a figure standing in the road. It was a man in mining gear, face blackened with coal dust, eyes burning faintly like embers. The figure lifted a hand as if to speak, then collapsed into smoke that curled away on the wind. Branham whipped the horse and fled, later telling neighbors that he had looked into the eyes of the dead. Over the decades, New River Gorge Road became infamous for strange encounters. Some drivers described entire groups of miners marching silently across the road, lanterns swinging in perfect unison. Others saw pale women in torn dresses waving for help near the river's edge, only to vanish when headlights swept past. A recurring apparition is that of a young boy holding a tin lunch pail, walking alone at night. Locals say he was a real child who died in a mine collapse in the 1920s, and that he still walks the road searching for a father who never came home. Accidents only deepened the road's reputation. The curves are sharp, the cliffs unforgiving. Fatal crashes are not uncommon, especially in fog. Survivors often describe a disturbing pattern. Just before the wreck, they saw something in the road. Sometimes it was a figure standing still. Sometimes it was a lantern bobbing in the dark. Sometimes it was a wagon crossing the road where no wagon existed. Many insist these visions caused them to swerve, straight into disaster. In 1967, a truck driver named Harold Pike was descending the gorge when he swore a group of miners stepped into his headlights. He slammed the brakes, but his rig jackknifed and nearly plunged off the cliff. When rescuers arrived, they found Pike shaken but alive. He insisted the miners had been solid, real men until they vanished seconds before impact. Locals still call that bend Pike's Curve. By the 1980s, paranormal researchers began to take interest. One team parked along the road near an abandoned mine entrance and left cameras running overnight. The footage revealed faint lights bobbing in the trees, moving in ways no car or flashlight could. When enhanced, the lights formed distinct shapes, human figures holding lanterns. Audio recorders captured faint coughing, the sound of boots on gravel, and at one point, a low voice groaning, "It hurts." Another investigation in 1994 turned darker. A group of college students drove the road at 2 a.m. hoping to film evidence of the supernatural. They later reported that their car was followed for several miles by a glowing light that hovered just behind the trunk. When they stopped, the light disappeared, but every window of the car was covered in handprints, smeared with what looked like coal dust. Local folklore adds fuel to the fear. One legend tells of the Hanging Man, a miner who was wrongfully accused of theft and lynched near the road in 1902. His ghost is said to dangle from the trees, swaying just out of sight. Drivers have reported glimpsing a body in their rearview mirrors, only to find nothing when they turn around. Another tale speaks of the widow, a woman in black who lost her husband and 2 sons in a mine collapse. She is seen kneeling by the roadside, clutching a Bible, weeping so loudly that it carries through closed car windows. But when approached, she disappears, leaving only the scent of smoke and lilacs. The most chilling, modern account comes from 2009. A family was driving home from a rafting trip late at night when their teenage daughter screamed that someone was in the road. The father swerved, narrowly avoiding the cliff. Shaken, he pulled over and asked his daughter what she had seen. Pale and trembling, she described a man covered in ash with no eyes, just holes. Weeks later, she began waking at night, claiming the man was standing in her room, dripping water onto the floor. The family moved away from the gorge within a year. Even today, rangers and rescue crews receive calls about phantom accidents, wrecked cars spotted by drivers that vanish when help arrives. More than one crew has rushed to a supposed crash site only to find skid marks that lead to nothing, or the echo of voices calling from below the cliffs where no one is found. Skeptics dismiss the stories as tricks of fog, exhaustion, or imagination fueled by the gorge's bloody history. But those who have driven the road after midnight rarely shrug it off so easily. The combination of sharp turns, steep drops, and the eerie silence of the mountains creates a perfect stage for fear. And whether real or imagined, the apparitions of New River Gorge Road leave a mark on those who see them. If you ever find yourself driving that road, headlights cutting through mist, the Black River yawning far below, remember this: the gorge is filled with ghosts, men who never saw daylight. Old Cades Cove Road snakes through the Great Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, a narrow, twisting path that was once a lifeline for pioneer families in the 1800s. Today, it is a mostly forgotten byway, half swallowed by forest and shadow, winding past moss-covered stone walls, collapsed barns, and weathered graveyards where settlers sleep beneath crooked headstones. In daylight, the road feels like a museum, an open-air relic of Appalachian life. But once the sun sinks behind the ridges, Old Cades Cove Road becomes something else entirely, a haunted artery where the dead refuse to rest. The cove itself is steeped in history. Settlers carved a life from its fertile valleys, building cabins, churches, and small farms. Life here was brutally hard. Disease, childbirth, feuds, and accidents claimed countless lives. Children were buried before their parents grew old. Entire families perished in winters that came too fast. The Civil War left scars as well, with bushwhackers and raiders sweeping through, leaving bodies in their wake. Dozens of graveyards dot the cove, many with unmarked stones. Locals say the road that threads through these places is more than just a path. It is a bridge between worlds. The earliest reports of hauntings date back to the late 1800s, when riders on horseback spoke of hearing hymns sung in the woods long after the churches closed their doors. Some claim to see lantern lights drifting among the trees, moving in silence, vanishing when approached. Others describe children darting across the road only to vanish into thin air. One of the most chilling stories comes from 1914, when a farmer named Thomas Elkins was riding home at dusk. As he neared the primitive Baptist church, he saw a woman in white standing by the roadside. Her face was pale, eyes dark, and she raised one hand as if to stop him. His horse balked, trembling, and refused to move forward. The woman glided closer, her feet never touching the ground. Terrified, Elkins whipped the horse around and fled. He later swore he heard soft weeping behind him the entire way home. Over time, the tales multiplied. Hikers reported seeing women in pioneer dresses wandering silently in the woods. Drivers claimed pale figures appeared in their headlights. Tourists sometimes heard the faint toll of a church bell in the dead of night, though the bell tower had long been removed. The cove's stillness seemed to magnify every sound: the crunch of gravel underfoot, the rustle of unseen movement in the trees, the low moan of wind slipping through abandoned chimneys. In 1956, a couple exploring the cove after dark claimed to have seen an entire funeral procession moving along Old Cades Cove Road. Men in 19th century clothing carried a coffin, followed by women in bonnets clutching candles. The witnesses watched in stunned silence until the procession rounded a bend and then vanished without a trace. When rangers investigated the next morning, there were no footprints, no wax drippings, no signs anyone had been there. Accidents along the road only fed the legends. Its sharp curves, sudden fog, and narrow shoulders caused countless wrecks. Survivors often reported distractions, figures appearing suddenly, strange lights bobbing in the distance, or disembodied voices calling their names. A chilling number of these accounts ended the same way, with the figure vanishing just before impact. In 1973, a park ranger named David Hensley experienced something that haunted him for the rest of his career. While patrolling late at night, he spotted a young girl standing near an old graveyard, her dress torn and dirty. Thinking she was lost, he pulled over and called out. The girl turned, her face pale and eyes hollow. Then she simply dissolved into mist. Hensley reported that the temperature plummeted, his breath visible in the summer air. He refused to patrol Old Cades Cove Road alone after that night. By the 1980s, paranormal researchers were drawn to the cove. One group camped near the primitive Baptist church and reported hearing organ music drifting through the trees, though no instruments existed there anymore. Audio recordings captured faint singing, like a choir of voices carried on the wind. Thermal cameras revealed human-shaped anomalies moving among the gravestones, though no living soul was present. Another investigation in 1995 uncovered something darker. A team left digital recorders inside the Missionary Baptist Church overnight. In the morning, they discovered a chilling EVP, a woman's voice whispering, "Get out!" Alongside it were sounds of children giggling and a man shouting angrily. Though the church had been locked and sealed the entire time, locals have their own explanations. Some believe the spirits are simply the restless dead of the cove, pioneers bound to their land, unwilling or unable to move on. Others think the Civil War left a scar so deep that its echoes still bleed into the present. A few whisper of something older still, tied to the Cherokee who once called the valley home. They say the land remembers suffering, and Old Cades Cove Road is where that memory manifests. In 2008, a family driving through at dusk had their own brush with the uncanny. The father, Mark Riley, later recounted that his young son asked why the children outside weren't wearing shoes. Mark and his wife looked out to see nothing but empty fields. But their son described, in chilling detail, 3 barefoot children walking beside the car, staring silently through the window. Weeks later, the boy began waking at night, insisting the children were in his room, whispering for him to come outside. Even in modern times, the road refuses to shed its haunted reputation. Visitors still report pale figures drifting through the woods, lantern lights bobbing in the darkness, and phantom hymns rising on the night air. Rangers receive calls every year from panicked travelers who insist they nearly struck someone standing in the middle of the road, someone who vanished the moment they swerved. To this day, locals advise caution. They warn, never stop for anyone. Harmon's Hollow is not marked on most maps. It's a narrow valley tucked deep in the Virginia Appalachians, hemmed in by steep ridges that blot out the sun early in the afternoon. Only one road runs through it, a single-lane strip of crumbling asphalt known locally as Harmon's Hollow Road. To outsiders, it looks like any other forgotten back road, winding past collapsed barns and skeletal trees. But to those who live in the region, Harmon's Hollow is whispered about with dread. They call it the road that eats the living. The history of the hollow is stained with blood. In the late 1700s, settlers clashed with indigenous tribes who considered the valley sacred ground. According to legend, an elder warned the newcomers that disturbing the land would bring endless sorrow. The settlers ignored the warning, building cabins and clearing forest. Within years, sickness swept through, wiping out entire families. The survivors abandoned their farms, claiming that at night they heard voices outside their doors, voices calling them by name. In the 1800s, a new wave of settlers tried again. They built a small church and schoolhouse, determined to tame the hollow. But tragedy followed. A preacher named Josiah Harmon gained a reputation for cruelty, punishing children harshly and driving women from the congregation with accusations of sin. One night in 1843, he vanished without a trace. His body was never found. Locals whispered that the hollow had claimed him, dragging him into the dark woods as payment for his cruelty. From then on, the valley carried his name, Harmon's Hollow. By the 1900s, the hollow was nearly deserted. A handful of families clung to the land, but stories spread of strange lights in the woods, phantom funerals marching down the road, and children who vanished while playing near the creek. County records confirm at least 3 disappearances between 1921 and 1949, none of which were ever solved. When the last school closed, the road became a forgotten connector between 2 rural highways, used only by hunters, loggers, and the occasional lost traveler. And yet, even in recent years, the reports continue. Harmon's Hollow Road is known among locals as a place where reality frays, where time seems to stretch unnaturally long, and where something inhuman watches from the trees. One of the earliest modern accounts comes from 1962. A pair of young men driving home from a dance cut through the hollow around midnight. As they descended into the valley, they noticed a funeral procession ahead, a line of dark horse-drawn wagons carrying coffins lit by flickering lanterns. The men slowed, uneasy, but when they blinked, the entire procession had vanished. Only the scent of candle smoke lingered in the air. Both men swore to their dying days that they had seen the funeral of the dead. In 1979, a hunter named Paul Stover spent the evening tracking deer near the hollow. At dusk, he decided to walk the road back to his truck. Halfway there, he heard footsteps behind him, heavy, dragging footsteps that matched his pace. When he stopped, the steps stopped. When he turned, no one was there. Terrified, he began to jog, then run, but the footsteps grew louder, closer, until he swore he felt breath on his neck. He burst into the clearing where his truck waited, slamming the door shut. The moment he turned the key, the noise stopped. Later, he found deep, wet footprints pressed into the gravel, larger than any humans, stretching all the way up to the driver's side door. Perhaps the most chilling account comes from 1991. A mother and her teenage daughter were driving the road late at night when their headlights picked out a little boy standing on the shoulder. He wore old-fashioned clothes and clutched a wooden toy horse. Concerned, they pulled over and asked if he was lost. The boy looked at them with hollow black eyes, then slowly smiled. His teeth were jagged, broken like splinters of bone. Before they could react, the boy dissolved into mist, leaving the toy horse lying in the dirt. To this day, that family swears the toy was real. They kept it locked in a box, afraid to touch it. Local police dismiss these tales, but they admit that Harmon's Hollow Road has a disproportionate number of accidents for its short length. Cars veer off without explanation. Drivers swear they saw someone step into the road, or that the headlights failed at the worst possible moment. In 2004, a man was killed after swerving to avoid a woman in white who appeared in his lane. His passenger survived, insisting that the woman was real, pale, barefoot, and holding a Bible. But no body was found. Paranormal investigators have tried to study the hollow with mixed success. In 2010, a group set up cameras and audio recorders along the road. The equipment captured hours of silence, broken only once by the sound of a man's voice whispering, "Get out." The strange part, every recorder picked up the whisper at the exact same time, though they were spread hundreds of feet apart. Locals say the hollow is cursed, a place where the sins of the past bleed into the present. They warn against driving it after sundown, claiming the dead are drawn to headlights, mistaking them for lanterns of the living. Some say Josiah Harmon himself still roams the valley, punishing those who trespass. Others believe the land was never meant for settlement at all, that something older, something buried deep in the mountains, claims the hollow as its own. A chilling modern story comes from 2018. A trucker hauling lumber decided to take the road as a shortcut. Around 2 a.m., he radioed his dispatcher, panicked, saying he saw dozens of figures lining the road ahead. They stood shoulder to shoulder, blocking his path, each holding what looked like a candle. The last words on the radio were, "They're coming closer." By the time authorities searched the road, the truck was found jackknifed against the hillside, engine still running, headlights shattered. The driver was gone. To this day, his body has never been recovered. Even now, people who live near the hollow avoid it after dark. They claim the trees seem to lean closer, as if listening. They say the air grows heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth and something sour, like rotting fruit. Some swear that if you drive slow enough, you'll hear voices calling your name from the woods. And if you stop, if you answer, you'll never leave the hollow alive. Harmon's Hollow Road remains open, though few willingly take it. On maps, it looks like just another rural byway, but to those who know its history, it is a scar in the landscape. A reminder that some places were never meant to be tamed. So if you ever find yourself driving through Virginia, late at night and you see a sign for Harmon's Hollow Road, don't turn down it. Don't follow the shortcut. Don't answer the voices in the dark, because once the hollow takes notice of you, it never lets go.